Today, we have an occult video that's going to talk about some matters involving higher planes. Our modern language does not have the words that truly describe this phenomena accurately, so it may be beneficial to connect multiple different topics together to try and understand these spiritual realities. Now, I know there will be people who think what we're about to mention has to do with demons because we mentioned Jinn, and there will be those who truly think that anything having to do with the occult is evil. This is what primitive and superstitious propaganda spread by the church in order to scare people from investigating these matters. If you haven't seen the video Influencing the Genius, I highly recommend taking the time to listen to the whole experience, then come back and listen to this one. First, we must ask ourselves, what is a mind? Well, according to mainstream definitions, the mind is the set of faculties including cognitive aspects such as consciousness, imagination, perception, thinking, intelligence, judgment, language, and memory, as well as non-cognitive aspects such as emotion and instinct. But this is simply stating that the mind is a faculty or some type of sense that an ego or individual holds, some type of ability. Is this true, or is this a misunderstanding? In ancient Greek, there was this concept of the logos. Quote, the Greek philosopher Heraclitus appears to be the first to have used the word logos to refer to a rational divine intelligence, which today is sometimes referred to in scientific discourse as the mind of God. The early Greek philosophical tradition known as Stoicism, which held that every human participates in a universal and divinely ordained community. To break this down, logos basically refers to the mind of God, but it's also an esoteric secret. There was a time in our past where our minds weren't so ego-based. We had a voice of God that we could hear and interact with as if it was normal. It connected us with nature, and we had the ability to speak and communicate with the logos. This is a time before we lost this connection, a time before we lost ourselves to our lower natures of thinking and ego. To be clear, this makes the indication that the minds of the ancients were far different than what we now consider to be a mind. Therefore, we will aim to write a new definition of mind and explore whether there is any validity to this statement of the logos. First, we must understand that the Greeks defined psyche as a mind or a soul, an invisible animating entity that occupies the physical body. Now we begin to question what a soul is, we will find that the Greek word is anima, or the movement of spiritual matters. It is the quality of air or life, that which moves. Therefore, what we call the mind is the experience of a hierarchy of spiritual forces that are encapsulated into multiple higher spiritual bodies known as the soul. Now, to consider this further, we must have an understanding of what is known in the occult as planes and bodies that then become synonymous with each other. This is the cosmology known as a hierarchy of spiritual planes, the top being the Godhead or pure consciousness, and this primary force trickles down into these lower planes in a way which the higher realms are creating the lower realms as they pass down through the causal mental planes, higher and lower astral, and etheric realms, finally passing down to the experience that we call the physical plane. Furthermore, what we call spirit is this pure consciousness or Godhead, and this spirit is what we all share, the universal life force that connects us all. Now, we must divide the soul into two sections, higher and lower souls, or oversouls and temporary souls. Oversouls are the bodies on the higher planes that exist through multiple lifetimes. They collect the karma data from our experiences over generations and exist on the higher astral planes of existence. These can be developed through good deeds and training through skill over time. As you reincarnate, this part of yourself can be accessed for making your new reincarnation more natural since you are more familiar with these realms you're going down to. Many do not have developed oversouls and therefore walk around in a sleep state, having to build their karma from scratch. Jesus mentions this in the Gnostic Gospels that there was something done by these higher beings that rearranged this mechanism to cause confusion in the lower realms from those being reincarnated. New souls would have to start all over and be stuck in a constant loop cycle without having anything to build upon. Our lower souls are more temporary and have to do with our astral bodies. This is actually what we refer to as the astral realm. We actually know of these things as thoughts, emotions, and beliefs are all connected to these higher realms. They're not physical, and furthermore, many of these thoughts are not what we think they are. Our ego is but a construction, a structure of thoughts, a barrier that leads us to believe that we are indeed our own minds. But as we've mentioned, physical definitions for the mind do not suffice, and to explain it as a mere faculty is to say that it's just like the physical sense of sight or touch. But there's something much deeper to this concept that takes the skill and understanding of a mystic to perceive. We are not our minds. In fact, what you call your own thoughts and emotions are not even your own, but they belong to multiple spiritual beings that reside within your own soul bodies on the higher planes. Keep in mind when we speak of higher matters that the noun body applied to these bodies does not mean the same thing as it does when it's applied to the physical body. But there's no really other good word to use except centers of consciousness, which is true, but then there's also a certain kind of organization about these centers, and for that reason they can also be called bodies. These centers of consciousness are also realities in which multiple beings, both negative and positive, inhabit. These invisible forces are what are actually doing the thinking for you, and they have convinced you to think that it's your own thinking, but it's not. All any one individual is doing at any moment is simply channeling higher forces down into the lower realms. Now, this may be confusing to the beginner, but this should be enough as an introductory explanation. We can come to further understanding as we progress forward with the topic of Genii. Now we're going to dissect a book from the 1700s called A Treatise of Spirits by John Beaumont. As mentioned in the introduction, many will immediately assume this has to do with witchcraft only, and the dealing of devils and demons, which, sure, you can be closed-minded and assume that that's all there is to this. However, I think if we investigate, we will find that there's something else going on, and this actually begins the journey of discovering what our minds truly are. Chapter 1. What the ancients understood the genii that are said to attend men to be as to their nature and offices. Censorinus tells us that genius is a god, under whose tuition each man is born and lives, and whether it be that he takes care of our generation, or is engineered with us, or takes upon our guardianship after we're begotten, he says he is called genius from geno, an ancient Latin word signifying to beget, in lieu of which the word gigno is now used. Genius is said to be the son of Jupiter and the earth, as being held to be the middle nature betwixt gods and men, or for that he somewhat partakes of body. Some have thought our genius to be the symmetry of the elements, which preserves humane bodies and all living creatures. Others, the secret power of the celestial bodies, by which we are impelled to do all things, and these were called geruli, from gero or ingero, that is, from supporting us or suggesting good or bad thoughts into our minds. Notice how he says that these things support us. They give us good or bad thoughts, meaning they can be guardian angels or demonic parasites. What the Latins call genius, the Greeks called daemon, which word, to pass by other significations according to its etymology, signifies prudent, knowing, skillful in affairs, and foreseeing things, they giving answers to those that have consulted them. In which sense Socrates thought famous men after death, for a reward of their virtue, were made daemons of a middle nature, mediating betwixt gods and men. Now, keep in mind, as he's explaining the huge difference between daemons and what we now call demons, the point is that we've associated all these genii and higher forces as negative demonic occurrences. Ludovicus Vives says it's a wonder to see how differing the opinions of the Gentiles were concerning the gods and daemons. As for the genii, some think them to be our own souls, some our inclinations, some a certain light attending us. Apuleius, a Latin Platonist philosopher, writes thus, "In a certain sense the mind of man, even while it is in the body, it's called a daemon. And therefore, a good desire of man is a good god, whence some think those are called blessed, eudaemons, whose daemons is good, that is, whose mind is perfect with virtue, which, I think, you may properly call a genius, because that God, which is in each man's mind, though it be immortal, yet in some sort is engendered within us." Famous occult author Cornelius Agrippa says that each man has a threefold genius to guard him, one sacred, another of the geniture, and the third of the profession a man follows. The first is not derived from the stars or planets, but given by God, it being universal and above nature. This directs the soul, still suggesting good thoughts, and enlightens us, though it be not always observed. But when we are purified and live in a calm, then it's perceived by us, then it speaks, as it were, with us and communicates its voice, being present before in silence, and labors continually to bring us to sacred perfection. The genius or daemon of the geniture descends to us from the deposition of the world and the circuits of the stars that are concerned in our generation. This is the sustainer and guardian of life. It procures it to the body and takes care of it afterwards, and aids the person from performing that office for which the heavens deputed him at birth. Those therefore have received a fortunate genius and are rendered strong, powerful, efficacious, and prosperous in their works. As to each man is given a good spirit, so there is an evil one, both which seek a union with our spirit and endeavor to draw it to them and so mix themselves with it. Okay, so let's break that down. So basically, we are given these demons and genii by God, and it's all based on our good works, or if you pursue a profession in high virtue, you're communicating and associating with the genii of good. But if you pick a profession that is sinful and not productive to the self, you're associating with demons that are bad spirits. This of course is of the third class. The others are kind of assigned to you based off your karmic and based on what God thinks is best for you. These beings are not like us humans in that they are spiritual forces or parasites. Not all parasites are evil, but they depend on our consciousness to thrive. In doing so, they try to merge themselves with our identity, making us believe that we are actually thinking our own individual thoughts. We continue, "The good by good works conformable to him changes us into angels by union, as he that adheres to God is made one spirit with him. The evil daemon, by bad works, endeavors to make us conformable and united to him, and this is what Hermes says, when a daemon flows into a humane soul, he sprinkles in seeds of his own notions. Hence, such a soul sprinkled with seeds, raised in a fury, brings forth wonderful things, and such as are the performances of daemons. For a good daemon, when he passes into a holy soul, he raises it to the light of wisdom. But an evil daemon, transfused into a wicked soul, incites it to thefts, murders, and lust, and whatsoever are the performances of evil daemons." Natalis Gomez, Italian mythographer, poet, and historian, says, "The genii, or daemons, present us with the species or images of those things which they persuade to us, as in a glass, on which images when our soul privately looks, those things come into our mind, which, if considered with reason, gives us a right determination of mind. But if a man, setting reason aside, be carried away with the guidance of evil species or images, he will of necessity incur many errors, especially if the images are presented to us by evil daemons." Erasmus, in his Adages, Dutch philosopher and Christian scholar, thinks Christian divines have ascribed to each person two angels, a good and a bad, though I think he says it with little reason. A communion with angels being so usual with the patriarchs from whom, in all probability, the Gentiles took their doctrine of the genii. The genii were drawn under several forms, as of a servant, a boy, a girl, a youth, or an old man. As Thebes in his tables, Censorinus and many of the ancients tell us, the layers in the Genii were the same. And there are countless other references to this phenomena from hundreds of different authors, but I think the point is made. At birth, we are assigned specific genii or higher spiritual consciousnesses that become our mind or genius. This gets deeper because it also is based on past lives and karmic credit that has gone to our oversoul, and if you did bad deeds in the past, you may be prescribed an evil spirit that causes you misfortune. But I think the keynote to take from this chapter is that these beings are what really form our minds. We're not doing the thinking. It's these genii or daemons or guardian angels, good or bad, that are actually doing the thinking and creating what we call genius or the mind. Now, Jinn are just a later derivation of this thought stream of genii and focuses on the negative, more evil spirits, but the main definition is an intelligent spirit of lower rank than the angels, able to appear in human and animal forms and to possess humans. This is very popular in Arabian and Muslim mythology, but again, this is kind of the polarization of this actual phenomena similar to demons and devils, but these beings do exist, but we just need to understand that Jinn is a reference to genii, who are necessary spiritual forces that are responsible for manifesting what we call mind. Yes, there are many demons, but if we break down what Jinn actually means, it can shed some light. Jinn is an Arabic collective noun deriving from the Semitic root jan, whose primary meaning is to hide or to adapt. Some authors interpret the word to mean literally beings that are concealed from the senses. In ancient texts, they're not always referenced as evil, even though this concept has developed through the ages to mean that they're inherently evil. But interestingly, these beings were used by Solomon to construct his famous temple. Noted by Surah al-Rahman in the Quran, they are invisible entities who roamed the earth before Adam, created by God out of fire and air. They are believed to resemble humans in that they eat and drink, have children and die, and are subject to judgment, being sent to either heaven or hell according to their deeds. There are also references saying the opposite, referring to any object that cannot be detected by human sensory organs, including angels, devils, and the interior of human beings. Accordingly, every devil and every angel is also a jinn, but not every jinn is an angel or a devil. We also have the famous story of Aladdin. Aladdin finds himself trapped in a cave. He's wearing a magic ring that a sorcerer has lent him when he rubs his hands in despair. He inadvertently rubs the ring and a Genii or genie appears and releases him from the cave, allowing him to return to his mother while in possession of the lamp. When his mother tries to clean the lamp so that they can sell it to buy food or for their supper, a second, far more powerful genie appears who is bound to do the bidding of the person holding the lamp. This idea that these genii can perform tasks or wishes for the user or magician is a constant theme, most likely the reason why they've been associated with evil because of greedy individuals using these beings for their own selfish purposes. However, before moving on, we must note that the ancient magicians weren't only summoning genii or jinns of evil for material desires, but they would communicate with nature spirits, like Solomon did, and be able to communicate with higher, more positive, invisible beings or genii that could influence positive, higher attributes such as wisdom. Now we bring it all together to explain how we go through different cycles, ages, and generations where we rise and fall. As we mentioned in the past, the ancient Greeks had a different mind, always referenced as a logos. There was no ego barrier and they could directly hear the voice of God. But another clue is that our reality itself wasn't so physical. These are the times of Atlantis, where magicians and magic took reign. All sorts of magical beings existed that no longer exist, and due to groups of evil dark magicians taking advantage of this knowledge, it is said that this wisdom was abused, and that was the reason for the flood and the destruction of Atlantis. But There is no avoiding this process, as it is the fundamental nature of consciousness. We can either be aware of it or be flooded in ignorance. Both can be negative. We're currently experiencing the negative aspects of ignorance of our spiritual bodies right now. So, even though you may feel that magic and understanding these higher matters are what causing us to sin, it's more so the corruption of the ego that has caused this negativity, not the process of reality or consciousness itself. You just can't avoid magic, as we have shown that the mind is not even yours. If you don't become aware of these genii, then they can influence you. Now, of course, many of us have learned to navigate with these beings in a positive light as if it was natural. We just follow our intuition and trust that we act in accordance with good. But many do not and become persuaded by these evil spirits easily, and much worse, they aren't even aware that it's not them. They are tricked into doing things through the internal voice or thoughts that occur in their heads. Depending on the virtues you pursue, it changes the effect of how powerful each voice is. Just think about the common trope of the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. We've gone through different ages of being, starting from the Godhead, then we began to manifest into different spiritual categories, otherwise known as the Sephiroths, or fallen ones, or planets. These are the essential God divided into simple categories. As these different forces unite in active and passive dichotomies, we get a myriad of unique and individual forms that begin to create all that we know in reality. This can be seen as the legions of angels under the archangels, or the tetragrammaton, or the four polar magnet: fire, water, air, and earth. These forces came after spirit, and so they inhabit within the spirit, or our spirit, slowly creating all forms that we now comprehend today through the different generations. Our reality that we know now first began on the astral, and it was much more malleable in the past. Thoughts had no lag. As soon as consciousness thought something, it was manifested into existence. It's not until slowly, through corruption and the creation of more dense forms and the creation of what we call the material realm, which was done by these archons or beings that trick us, that we begin to fall for the illusion of the physical plane and ego. And so, they became higher beings, but don't get it twisted. These beings reside within us, or within our pure consciousness spirit. Therefore, they can be controlled and influenced, hence the influence of the genius. We must reclimb this generational ladder and reclaim our true bodies, or true centers of consciousness, for only then can we truly be unaffected by negative external influences. It's also important to keep in mind that there are beneficial spirits or guardian angels that are assigned to us or have been connected with us through generations of different lifetimes that assist in this process of reawakening. Only by understanding what our mind is and by inspection can we confirm these statements. Until then, all we can hope is that our minds may be unveiled.
Let go of everything you think to be true. Relax the mind and ask the question, do I truly understand what this reality is?